My first attempt didn't go too well, so here we go again. Let's try this a second time. So, don't know if you've been following me in the first half, but it is time for part two of The Stranger by Albert Camus, one of the most influential books in my life. Yeah, cosmic nihilism, absurdism, uh, existential dread. Here it is. Hi, Milk Killer's getting here before I start reading a word. You're in here in time. I think like two people actually watched this. I think you and Daddy-O Game from Kiddy-O Games channel. Daddy-O Game there. But he's an English teacher, I do believe. So I know he teaches math. I think he also teaches English. So makes sense. If you don't know Mount Killer, please check out his channel, Mount Killer. Please feel free to link yourself. I'll mod you. Yeah, you're definitely a moderator. Yeah, managing moderator. Yeah, there you go. Not that I need any moderators, but now you can do links. There you go. Please feel free to link your channel. He's a good friend of mine. Love the guy, and I've never won or been given a damn thing from him. So, oh, I know. Yeah, all the droves of people, just coming to me, going, "Sweet Lord Christ, we can't figure out our lives. Please, Void, tell us what to do with your book by Camus." Oh, it's not happening, man. I think you'll be fine. If you gain a subscriber, you owe me you owe me $5 if you gain one subscriber from me, that'd be astonishing. Right after my arrest, because you remember he shot the man on the beach. Okay, that's how part one ended. He shot. He blinked. He cleared his eyes. Well, he cleared his eyes with his other hand and continued to shoot. The Arab on the beach. Okay. Right after my arrest, I was questioned several times, but I was just so long so they could find out who I was, which didn't take long. The first time at the police station, nobody seemed very interested in my case. A week later, however, the examining magistrate looked over at me with curiosity. But to get things started, he simply asked my name, my address, occupation, and the date and place of my birth. Then he wanted to know if I had hired an attorney. I admitted that I hadn't, and inquired whether it was really necessary to have one. Why do you ask? He said. I said I thought my case was pretty simple. He smiled and said, "That's your opinion, but the law is the law. If you don't hire an attorney yourself, the court will appoint one." I thought it was very convenient that the courts take care of those details. I told him so. He agreed with me and concluded that it was a good law. At first, I didn't take him seriously. I was led into a curtained room. There was a single lamp on the desk, which was shining on a chair where they made me sit while he remained standing in the shadow. I had read descriptions of scenes like this in books, and it all seemed like a game to me. That should be very indicative of his personality. In fact, my mouth's a little dry from nasal medication here. Allergy season sucks, and it's Florida, so I mean it's named after how many flowers we have. Come on. All right, Listerine strip. Come on. I'm not checking my phone. I don't give a fuck about my phone. I am reading a book. After our conversations, though, I looked at him and saw a tall, fine-featured man with deep-set blue eyes, a long gray mustache. Well, not yet. Working on that. Long gray mustache and lots of thick, almost white hair. He struck me as being very reasonable and overall quite pleasant, despite a nervous tic which made his mouth twitch now and then. On my way out, I was even going to shake his hand, but just in time, I remembered that I had killed a man. The next day, a lawyer came to me to see me at the prison. He was short and chubby, quite young, and his hair carefully slicked back. Despite the heat, I was in my shirt sleeves. He had on a dark suit, a wing collar, and an odd-looking tie with a broad black and white stripes. He put the briefcase he was carrying down on my bed, introduced himself, and said he had gone over my file. My case was a tricky one, but he had no doubts we'd win, if I trusted him. I thanked him, and he said, "Let's get down to business." He sat down on the bed and explained to me that there are some investigations into my private life. It had been learned that my mother had died recently at the home. Inquiries had then been made at the Marengo. Uh, the investigators had learned that I had shown insensitivity the day of Maman's funeral. You understand, my lawyer says. It's a little embarrassing for me to have to ask you this, but it's very important, and it will be a strong argument for the prosecution if I can't help come up with some answers. He wanted me to help him. He asked if I felt any sadness that day. The question caught me by surprise, and it seemed to me that I would have been very embarrassed if I had asked it. Nevertheless, I answered that I had pretty much lost the habit of analyzing myself and that it was hard for me to tell him what he wanted to know. I probably did love Maman, but that didn't mean anything. At one time or another, all normal people have wished their loved ones were dead. Here the lawyer interrupted me, and he seemed very upset. He made me promise I wouldn't say that at my hearing or in front of the examining magistrate. I explained to him, however, that my nature was such that my physical needs often got in the way of my feelings. The day I buried Maman, I was very tired, sleepy, so much so that I wasn't really aware of what was going on. What I can say for certain is that I would have rather Maman hadn't died. But my lawyer didn't seem satisfied. He said, that's not enough. He thought for a minute. He asked me if I could say that that day I had held back my natural feelings. I said, no, because it's not true. He gave me a strange look, as if he found me slightly disgusting. He told me in almost a snide way that in any case, the director and the staff at the home would be called as witnesses and that things would get very nasty for me. I pointed out to him that none of this had anything to do with my case, but all he said was that it was obvious I had never had any dealings with the law. You see the absurdity of all this? Like, what does any of this have to do? It's all to his character. Fuck his character. What are just get to the facts of the case. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me. He left, looking angry. I wish I could have made him stay to explain that I had wanted things between us to be good, but so that he'd defend me better. But if I can put it this way, good in a natural way. Mostly, I could tell I made him feel uncomfortable. He didn't understand me. He sort of was holding it against me. I felt the urge to reassure him that I was like everybody else, just like everybody else, but really there wasn't much point. I gave up the idea out of laziness. Shortly after that, I was taken before the examining magistrate again. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and this time his office was filled with sunlight, barely softened by the flimsy curtain. It was very hot. He had me sit down and very politely informed me that, due to unforeseen circumstances, my lawyer had been unable to come. Hey, thank you. Thanks. I used to do, but act, sing, so I have a little bit of experience. But I just wanted to read this to my stream so people had a little bit of culture in your lives. A little something beyond just baseball and Pokemon that makes up my life. Philosophy. Okay. But I had the right to remain silent and to wait for my lawyer's counsel. I said that I could ask for myself. He pressed a button on the table. A young clerk came in and sat down right behind me. The two of us leaned back in our chairs, and the examination began. He started out by saying that people were describing me as taciturn and withdrawn person, and he wanted to know what I thought. And I answered, it's just that I don't have much to say, so I keep quiet. He smiled the way that he had the first time, agreed that that was the best reason of all, and added, besides, it's not important. Then he looked at me without saying anything, leaned forward rather abruptly, and said very quickly, what interests me is you. I didn't really understand what he meant by that, so I didn't respond. There are one or two things, he added, that I don't quite understand. I'm sure you'll help me clear things up. And I said it was all pretty simple. He pressed me to get back over that day. I went back over what I had already told him. Raymond, the beach, the swim, the quarrel, then back to the beach, the little spring, the sun, and the 5 shots from the revolver. After each sentence, he would say, "Fine, fine." When I got to the body lying there, he nodded and said, "Good." But I was tired of repeating the same story over and over. It seemed as if I had never talked so much in my life. After a short silence, he stood up and told me that he wanted to help me, that I interested him, and that, with God's help, he would do something for me. But first, he wanted to ask me a few more questions. Without working up to it, he asked if I loved Mammal. I said, yes, the same as anyone. And the clerk, who up to then had been typing steadily, must have hit the wrong key because he lost his place and had to go back. Yeah, he lost his place. Same as everybody. Like, well, saying, "Did you love your mother?" It's like, yeah. I mean, unless I had like a really big beef with your mother, like, or she abandoned you and you never knew her or some shit like that. It's like, oh yeah, did you love your mother? Well, what the fuck type of question is that? Anyway, it's just the fact that anyone can just say something that's true and honest and forthright, and someone take it as unnerving, even though it's the absolute truth, bothers me. That's why this book gets to me every time I read it. And the clerk, who up to that time had been typing steadily, must have hit the wrong key because he lost his place and had to go back again. Again, without any apparent logic, the magistrate then asked if I had fired all 5 shots at once. I thought for a minute and explained that at first I had fired a single shot, and a few seconds later, the other 4. Then he said, "Why did you pause between the first and second shot?" Once again, I could see the red sand and feel the burning of the sun on my forehead, but this time I didn't answer. In the silence that followed, the magistrate seemed to be getting fidgety. He sat down, ran his fingers through his hair, put his elbow on his desk, and leaned forward me and slightly with a strange look on his face. Why? Why you shoot a body that was already on the ground? Once again, I didn't know how to answer. The magistrate ran his hands across his forehead and repeated the question with a slightly different tone in his voice. I mean, why? You must tell me why. Still, I didn't say anything. Suddenly, he stood up, strode over to a far corner in his office, and pulled out a drawer in his file cabinet. I can see like the frustration of this dude reading. Oh, as I read this, the magistrate just like trying to figure out like why he paused. Like the entire case hinges on the fact that he paused between the first shot and the second shot, not the fact that he shot him 5 times. It all hinges on the fact that his eyes had salt and sun and sand and everything in them. He'd been on the beach. He had already had a run in with this motherfucker. He sees him on the ground. Guy goes for a knife. He's got his buddy's gun. This is the 50s, remember? So this is way more common just to be walking around in Europe with a revolver. They didn't have gun restraints like we do now. Anyway, he took out a silver crucifix, which he had brandished as he came across me, and in a completely, almost cracked voice, he shouted, "Do you know what this is?" I said, "Yes, of course." Speaking very quickly and passionately, he told me that he believed in God and that he was with his conviction that no man was guilty, that God would not forgive him. But in order for what to happen, a man must repent, and in so doing become like a child whose heart is open and ready to embrace all. He was leaning all the way over the table. He was waving his crucifix almost directly over my head. To tell the truth, I had found it very hard to follow his reasoning. First, because I was hot. There were big flies in his office, kept on landing on my face. Also because he was scaring me a little bit. Oh, thanks. This is how it sounds in my head when I read a book. That's how it comes out my mouth. This is how I read a menu. I always have. This is just the way I talk. I'm sorry, Laura. I always kind of just dictate. Always have, always will. It's just the way I speak. Very, very forward person. So anyway, at the same time, I knew that it was ridiculous because after all, I was the criminal. He went on anyway. I vaguely understood that to his mind, there was just one thing that wasn't clear in my confession, the fact that I had hesitated before I fired my second shot. The rest was fine, but that part he couldn't understand. was about to tell him he was wrong to dwell on it because it really doesn't matter. Shot him once, he was dead. Shot him 4 more times afterward. He was deader, faster. The why? I live in Florida. That would never even be asked as a question. Why did you hesitate? They ask rather, why didn't you empty your entire mag? Why didn't you reload? This is Florida. It's a stand your ground state in the South in the deep red Bible Belt. So, but that part he really couldn't understand. So don't dwell on it. Doesn't matter, right? But he cut me off and urged me one last time, drawing himself up to his full height and asking me if I believed in God. I said no. He sat down indignantly. He said it was impossible. All men believed in God, even those who turned their backs on him. That was his belief, and if he were ever to doubt it, his life would become meaningless. Sound like any Christians you know? I know a lot of them. I know quite a few. Do you want my life to be meaningless? He shouted. I'm not kidding you. That's how it's written. I did take a pause between those 2 lines because of that. Yeah, I don't care if you're a Christian or not. Everybody knows I'm an atheist. I don't hide it. But yeah, to each their own thing, whatever. But I know a lot of people that it hinges on me believing deep down that I'll come back, that I'm just a wayward stray lamb waiting to. I mean, everybody's agnostic until we're dead. Nobody knows. You can pretend to know. That's called faith. Or you can be like, I don't know, but I'm pretty damn well sure there's not, because that God doesn't make much sense. That God doesn't make much sense. And you can just go down the list of gods, and I mean, there's a lot of them. I mean, just ask the Hindus. Good God, they have a pantheon of gods that's I can't count that high. Tens, hundreds of thousands of gods, because certain villages have their own little god and have for hundreds, thousands of years, and there they are. Can't say they're any less a god than whatever Yahweh or Jehovah is, or Allah. Don't cancel me. I don't care about any of your religions. You're not special for yours. Sorry. Not going to make a special exception for anyone's. You're all equal in my eyes, just like God's, right? Anyway, do you want my life to be meaningless? He shouted. I love that. That was his belief, and if he were ever to doubt it, his life would become meaningless. This is what he's saying to himself, and then the guy screams out loud, "Do you want my life to be meaningless?" I've had moments like that where I'm like, this person, this is the only thing they fucking have, and they'll be like, "This is the only thing I have." Like, God damn, I don't need that ETB. Not that bad. Fucking scalper. It was a scalper, but still. This was recently. It was funny. I liked it. I was at Walmart buying almond milk. That was it. Might have picked up some vodka on the way out, but still, I was only there for the. Yeah, I do have a few credits. I started in high school with the dual enrollment and advanced placement. So, yeah, I took a lot of theology classes, and they loved me for it down here. I was a Christian at the time, though, so I apologize. Mea culpa. As far as I could see, it didn't have anything to do with me, and I told him so. But from across the table, he had already thrust the crucifix in my face and was screaming at me irrationally, "I am a Christian. I ask him to forgive you your sins. How can you but not believe in he who suffered for you?" I was struck by how sincere he seemed, but I had had enough. It was getting hotter and hotter. As always, whenever I want to get rid of somebody I'm not really listening to, I made it appear as though I agreed. To my surprise, he acted triumphant. You see? You see? You do believe, don't you? And you're going to the place you trust in him, aren't you? Obviously, again, I said no. He fell back in his chair. He seemed to be very tired. I'm sure at this point he would be. He would be with me at this point. So it would be the same thing, but I don't go around shooting Arabs on the beach. I'll never be on a beach. I don't carry a weapon on me. That's a gun, and I don't have any enemies that I know of that I would have to kill. Good God, I buy and sell Pokemon cards. It's not really like I'm changing the world. Anyways, I'll get back to the literature. You've heard enough from me. So he fell back in his chair. He seemed to be very tired. He didn't say anything for a minute while the typewriter, which hadn't let up the whole time, can you imagine this poor typist? The whole time was still tapping out the last few sentences. Then he looked at me closely with a little sadness in his face. In a low voice, he said, I've never seen a soul as hardened as yours. The criminals who have come before me have always wept at the sight of this image and suffering. The crucifix. I'd show you one, but they're all in a different room. Ex-Catholics, we had a lot. I had a lot. I was about to say that was precisely because they were criminals. But then I realized that I was one too. It was an idea I could get used to. Then the judge stood up, as if to give me the signal that the examination was over. He simply asked in the same weary tone if I was sorry for what I had done. I thought about it for a minute and said that more than sorry, I felt kind of annoyed. I got the impression he didn't understand, but that was as far as things went that day. After that, I saw a lot of the magistrate, except that my lawyer was with me each time. So he already had an ex parte communication with the judge, just to figure out why he took a pause between shots. You realize this should already have been thrown out. This is completely an illegitimate case at this point. One ex parte communication right there. You got to throw it out. Am I right, Gengar? Nothing in my room talks other than me. After that, I saw a lot of the magistrate, except for that, my lawyer with me each time, but it was just a matter of clarifying certain things in my previous statements. Or else the magistrate would discuss the charges with my lawyer. But on those occasions, they never really paid much attention to me. Anyway, the tone of the questioning gradually changed. The magistrate seemed to have lost interest in me and to have come to some sort of decision about my case. He didn't talk to me about God anymore, and I never saw him as worked up as he was that first day. The result was our discussions became more cordial. That's not good. A few questions, a brief conversation with my lawyer, and the examinations were over. As the magistrate put it, my case was taking its course. And then sometimes when the conversation was of a more general nature, I would be included. I started to breathe more freely. No one in any of these meetings was rough with me. Everything was so natural, so well handled, so calmly acted out that I had the ridiculous impression of being one of the family. I can say that at the end of the 11 months that this investigation lasted, I was almost surprised that I had ever enjoyed anything other than those rare moments when the judge would lead me to the door of his office, slap me on the shoulder, and say to me cordially, "That's all for today, Monsieur Antichrist." I would then be handed back over to the police. I'm not done. Monsieur Antichrist is not done. There are some, if you didn't understand, yes, I do relate to the main character in this story. And while I've never been in jail for attempted or murder or manslaughter, I was arrested and almost fully tried. It got close to trial until it was thrown out for sales and delivery of crack cocaine. Yeah. YouTube is going to strike this down because I said I have a felony arrest. However, I do not have a felony conviction because I actually did not do the goddamn thing. And no one believed me. I was shoeless and smelled like pot when they picked me up. Why would they believe me? A long hair hippie, 21, 22, still living with his parents, not gone off to college. I was back from college, actually. So, yeah, I really relate to the Plongeo. Drell, it's nice to meet you. We're just about to start chapter 2. of the Stranger by Albert Camus. Don't know if you're a fan of that, fan of Pokemon cards. Know who I am, don't know who I am, or what? Oh yeah, Lori, you should kind of be a moderator, shouldn't you? You're gonna be a standard moderator. There you go, love. I know you well enough to let you mod. There, cleared my throat. Should be a little bit better now, not as raspy. There are some things I've never liked talking about. A few days after I entered prison, I realized that I wouldn't like talking about this part of my life. Later on, though, I no longer saw any point to my reluctance. In fact, I wasn't really in prison those first few days. I was sort of waiting for something to happen. It was only after Marie's first and last visit that it all started. From the day I got her letter, she told me she would no longer be allowed to come because she wasn't my wife. Yeah, girlfriend doesn't count. Sorry. Like I said, allergy season, I have to clear my throat and sniffle a lot. Sorry. From that day on, I felt as if I was at home in my cell and that my life was coming to a standstill there. The day of my arrest, I was first put in a room where they were already released several prisoners, most of them Arabs. They laughed when they saw me. Then they asked what I was in for. I said I'd killed an Arab, and they were all silent. A few minutes later, it got dark. They showed me how to fix the mat I was supposed to sleep on. One end could be rolled up to be made into a pillow. At night, I felt the bugs crawling all over my face. A few days later, I was put in a cell by myself where I slept on a wooden board suspended from a wall. I had a bucket for a toilet and a tin washbin. The prison was on the heights above the town, and through a small window I could see the sea. One day I was gripping the bars, my face straining toward the light. A guard came in and told me I had a visitor. I thought it must be Marie. It was. To get to the visiting room, I went down a long corridor and then some stairs, finally another corridor. I walked into a very large room brightened by a huge bay window. The room was divided into 3 sections by 2 large grates, and that ran the length of the entire room. Between the 2 grates was a space of 8 to 10 meters, which separated the visitors from the prisoners. I spotted Marie standing at the opposite end of the room, with her striped dress and her sun-tanned face. On my side of the room, there were about 10 prisoners, most of them Arabs. Marie was surrounded by Moorish women and found herself between 2 visitors. I'm not being, yeah. Lori, honey, I see you enough. Here, yes, you can be a moderator. It's the way I know who I know. I don't know Cadro. So, welcome, Cadro, to my little circle of hell. I usually do cards. I'm a Pokemon card and baseball card collector. I'm a geek, but I like literature. Oh, you came here from Lori. Okay, thanks. Lori, who I told explicitly not to tell anyone about my channel. Thank you, Lori. Love you, lady. Jesus Christ. No one can follow a fucking instruction. Anyway, she's in her striped dress with her tan face. Room's all divided. Lots of Moorish women. Got it. I'm not being racist when I say things like Moorish. That is the book. It got a Pulitzer Prize. Do not throw rocks at me. I spotted Marie out. Okay. Okay. Barehead. Okay. Marie was surrounded by Moorish women and found herself between 2 visitors. A little thin-lipped old woman dressed in black and a fat, bareheaded woman who was talking at the top of her voice. And the grates, and making lots of gestures. Because the distance between the grates, the visitors and the prisoners were forced to speak very loudly. When I walked in, the sound of the voices echoing off the room's high, bare walls and the harsh light pouring out from the sky onto the windows and the spilling into the room brought on a kind of dizziness. My cell was quieter and darker. So you can imagine the exposure. He's been in this cell, no visitors, nothing. All of a sudden, 10 Moorish women, 10 Arab men standing there, all of them screaming, 10 meters, 8 meters from each other. That's 24 to 37 feet-ish. Americans, like idiot Americans like me. And then finally, this big, tall, echoey, boomy room. Everybody's screaming, and there's blinding light coming in through slats. It would be dizzying to anyone. It took me a few seconds to adjust, but eventually I could see each face clearly, distinctly in the bright light. I noticed there was a guard sitting at the far end of the passage between the two grates. Most of the Arab prisoners and their families had squatted down facing each other. They weren't shouting, despite the commotion, and they were managing to make themselves heard by talking in very low voices. Their subdued murmuring coming from lower down formed a kind of bass accompaniment to the conversation crossing above their heads. I took all this in very quickly as I made my way toward Marie. Already pressed up against the grate, she was smiling her best smile for me. I thought she looked very beautiful, but I didn't know how to tell her. Well, she called across to me. Well, here I am. Are you all right? Do you have everything you want? Yes, everything? We stopped talking and Marie went on smiling. The fat woman yelled at the man next to me, her husband probably, a tall blond guy with an honest face. It was a continuation of a conversation already underway. Jean wouldn't take him, she shouted as loudly as she could. Uh-huh, said the man. I told her you'd take him back when you get out, but you wouldn't take him. And it was Marie's turn to shout that Raymond sent his regards, and I said thanks, but my voice was drowned out by the man next to me who asked, Is she all right? His wife asked and said, He's never been better. The man on my left, a small young man with delicate hands, wasn't saying anything. I noticed that he was across from the little old lady and that they were staring intently at each other. But I didn't have time to watch them any longer because Marie shouted to me that I had to have hope. Mm-hmm. Something I can tell you. There's hope and faith. Hope leads to inactivity. Hope is useless. Hope is like pity. Pity isn't sympathy. Sympathy moves you toward action. Hope leads you to inaction, just like faith and prayer. They lead you to not act because you have faith that God will act for you. Everybody says, be the change you want to see in the world and all that shit. But then they just go, well, I'll pray for you. Okay? That's not going to do anything. Fucking do something. Get off your ass. Do something. Don't tell me I gotta have hope. That doesn't make any sense. Still, I said yes. I was looking at her as she said it. I wanted to squeeze her shoulders through her dress. I wanted to feel the thin material. I really didn't know what else I had to hope for other than that. But that was probably what Marie meant, because she was still smiling. Yeah, I'm sure they still were. It's been 11 months since he killed the Arab, so yeah. All I could see was the sparkle of her teeth and the little folds of her eyes. I'll never see the sparkle of my teeth. That's kind of hard to do. There's not many left. Don't smoke tobacco, kids. She shouted again, You'll get out and we'll get married. I answered, You think so? But it was mainly just to say something. Then very quickly and still in a very loud voice, she said yes, and that I would be acquitted and that we would go swimming again. But the other woman took her turn to shout and said that she had left a basket at the clerk's office. She was listing all the things that she had put in it to make sure they were all there because they cost a lot of money. The young man and his mother were still staring at each other. The murmuring of the Arabs continued below us. Outside, the lights seemed to surge up over the bay window. I was feeling a little sick, and I'd have liked to leave. The noise was getting painful. Oh, God, I hate that shit. Ugh, like talking when you're in a crowd. Well, you can imagine I'm not a big fan of groups of people and physical. Yeah. That's why I had no problem with the stage. See, the stage elevated. So if I was playing music or I was acting, they couldn't get backstage. But I could feel like I was with people. Does that make sense? Why someone who's antisocial got into acting and music to begin with, because it seems completely indicative of anything I would be. Because it's like, no, I'm just here for the moment. Trust me, I never invited my friends or family to any of the performances. I'm like, they're not for you. They're for me. This is a selfish thing I'm doing. This is, man, I didn't know why people didn't understand that. But the Christian music rock industry does suck a dick. I'll tell you that much. Anyway, back to swimming again and getting married and all the hope and joy of the raging boner he must be trying to hold down. Because it's been 11 months. He's a young man. Come on. The young man and his mother were still staring at each other, murmuring that I was feeling a little sick and I'd like to leave. The noise was getting painful, but on the other hand, I wanted to get the most of Marie's being there. I don't know how much time went by. Marie told me about her job, and she never stopped smiling. The murmuring, the shouting, and the conversations were crossing back and forth. The only oasis of silence was next to me, where the small young man and the old woman were gazing at each other. One by one, the Arabs were taken away. Almost everyone stopped talking as soon as the first one left. The little old woman moved closer to the bars, and at the same moment, a guard motioned to her son. He said, "Goodbye, Mamo." And she reached between the two bars to give him a long, slow little wave. She left just as another man came in, a hat in hand, and took her place. Another prisoner was brought in, and they talked excitedly, but softly, because the room had once again grown quiet. They came for the man on my right, and his wife said to him without lowering her voice, as if she hadn't noticed there was no need to shout anymore, "Take care of yourself and be careful." And it was my turn. Marie threw me a kiss. I looked back before disappearing. She hadn't moved, and her face was still pressed against the bars with that same sad, forced smile on it. No forced smile is worth it. And always remember, fangs ruin any cute pout. Shortly after that was when she wrote to me, and the things I've never liked talking about began. Anyways, I shouldn't exaggerate, and it was easier for me than for others. He's talking about prison in Algeria, and a men's prison in Algeria. Part of his life he doesn't like talking about. You tracking? You guys tracking? He's not like a hardcore killer or gangster. He's just a young man. He's just a young nihilist. Maybe probably a skinny, maybe a Yankees fan back in the day. I don't know. Wouldn't have been good. Yeah. Yeah. Not good for him. That's why I said this one line is just so brutal. Shortly after that was when she wrote to me, and the things I've never liked talking about began. So he's not getting visits; he's getting letters now. Nobody's visiting him. She's just writing him, and the things he doesn't like to talk about began. Jesus. Sometimes this book just hits you in the gut, you know? I shouldn't exaggerate. It was easier for me than for others. When I was first in prison, the hardest thing that was that my thoughts were still those of a free man. For example, I would certainly have the urge to be on a beach and to walk down to the water. As I imagined the sound of the first waves under my feet, my body entering the water, and the sense of relief it would give me, all of a sudden I would feel just how closed in I was by the walls of my cell. But that only lasted a few months. Afterwards, my only thoughts were those of a prisoner. I waited for my daily walk, which I took in the courtyard, before a visit from my lawyer. The rest of the time I managed pretty well. At the time, I often thought that if I had to live in the trunk of a dead tree with nothing to do but look up at the sky flowering overhead, little by little I would have gotten used to it. I would have waited for the birds to fly by or clouds to mingle, just as here I waited to see my lawyer's ties, and just as in another world I used to wait patiently until Saturday to hold Marie's body in my arms. Now, as I think back on it, I wasn't in a hollow tree trunk. There were others worse off than me. Anyway, it was one of Maman's ideas, and she often repeated it. Said after a while, you could get used to anything. Besides, I usually didn't take things too far. The first months were hard, but in fact, the effort I had to make helped pass the time. For example, I was tormented by my desire for a woman. It was only natural. I was young. I never thought specifically of Marie, but I thought of much about a woman, about women, about all the ones I had known, about all the circumstances in which I had enjoyed them, that my cell would be filled with their faces and crowded with my desires. In one sense, it threw me off balance, but in another, it killed time. I ended up making friends with the head guard, who used to make the rounds with the kitchen hands at mealtime. He's the one who first talked to me about women. He told me it was the first thing the others complained about. I told him it was the same for me, that I always thought it was an unfair treatment. But, he said, that's exactly why you're in prison. What do you mean that's why? Well, yeah, it's freedom. That's why. They've taken away your freedom. I'd never thought about that. I agreed. It's true, I said. Otherwise, what would be punishment? Right, he said. You see, you understand these things. The rest of them don't. But they just end up doing it by themselves. The guard left after that. Lemon party. Ugh. There were the cigarettes, too. Yeah, the things people will do for a cigarette in there. Never been to prison, guys. Don't take this wrong. Just because I relate to this guy, I've never been to prison, so I've never firsthand experienced these things. But I have a lot of friends, and not all of them made the best decisions in life. Anyway, there were the cigarettes too. When I entered prison, they took away my belt, my shoelaces, my tie, everything I had in my pockets, my cigarettes in particular. Once I was in my cell, I asked to have them back, but I was told I wasn't allowed. The first few days were really rough. That may be the thing that was the hardest for me. I would suck on chips of wood that I broke off my bed planks. I walked around nauseated all day long. God, how much do you smoke? Now, I consume a lot of nicotine, and I've gone without. I mean, I forget where my vape is for a day. It doesn't really dawn on me to go buy another one because this one has a battery attached to it, and I have to go buy another damn battery, and that means I have to go to the head shop, not the corner store, because the corner store only has my vapes, not my batteries. So I put a complication in between me and the difficulty of obtaining and maintaining a nicotine addiction because it cost me my fucking teeth. Jack-o'-lantern. Get it? Yeah, that's awful. It's a fucking nightmare in there. So if it sounds like I lisp, that's because my mouth is getting dry and I'm low on the teeth end. I couldn't understand why they had taken them away and when they didn't hurt anybody. I love that sentence because it's 1956 when this book was written. And he's like walking around nauseated, subjugating himself to sucking on wood chips broken off of a bed that is just pieces of wood on a plank that God knows how many fucking prisoners, or I would say jail inmates, so even drunk tanks. So this is even the drunk tanks style jail. So think of all the action and bodily fluids this thing has seen. And he's sucking on, and then he has the statement. And this is before anybody said anything about tobacco being dangerous or even addictive. All right, this is before that. Before we knew then what we know now. Oh, I love that. I couldn't understand why they had taken them away when they didn't hurt anyone. Later on, I realized that that too was part of the punishment. It is. They love that in jail. They're sadists, bastards. But by then, I had gotten used to not smoking, and it wasn't a punishment anymore. Yeah, I give it 3 days. Apart from these annoyances, I wasn't too unhappy. Once again, the main problem was killing me. Gonna have to do it yourself over there, buddy. Eventually, once I learned how to remember things, I wasn't bored at all. Sometimes I would get to thinking about my room, and in my imagination, I would start at one corner and circle the room, mentally noting everything that was on the way. Oh God, that would take me forever. That's a good idea if I ever get locked up. I'll have to think of that because this is like uh like everywhere is just memorabilia and shit. So it's like it like just yeah. What's around my room? Oh fuck, what isn't? Shorter list. First, it didn't take that long, but every time I started over, it took a little bit longer. This is a good mental trick. If you're ever lost, bored, this is a good mental trick. Create in your own mind, a room, or think back to a room. Add something to it every time. Go through it. This is a really good mental exercise, and it keeps you sharp. Just an idea. And look, I'm not selling you an app that has to do it. You don't have to pay me a thing. Uh, cash symbol, void star. That's my cash app. There you go. I would remember every piece of furniture, and on every piece of furniture, every object. And of every object, all the details, and all the details themselves a flake, a crack, a chipped edge, the color, the texture. At the same time, I would try not to lose the thread of my inventory and to make a complete list so that after a few weeks, I could spend hours just enumerating things that were in my room. And the more I thought about it, the more I dug out of my memory things that I had overlooked and forgotten. I realized then that a man who had lived only one day could easily live for 100 years in prison. He would have enough memories to keep him from being bored. In a way, it was an advantage. Then there was sleep. At first, I didn't sleep well at night, and not at all during the day. Little by little, my nights got better, and I was able to sleep during the day too. In fact, during the last few months, I've been sleeping 16 to 18 hours a day. That would leave me up to 6 hours to kill with meals, nature's call, my memories, and the story about the Czechoslovakian. Between my straw mattress and the bed planks, I had actually found an old scrap of newspaper, yellow and transparent, half stuck to the canvas. Oh, cigarette roller and paper now, buddy. Hope you find some loosey tobacco when you're out cleaning yards. When you're out cleaning the side of the road, get that loose tobacco, put it in your prison purse, get it home. Make you not somebody's bitch for a day. There you go. A man had left a Czech village to seek a fortune. 25 years later, and now rich, he had returned with a wife and child. His mother was running a hotel with his sister in the village where he'd been born. In order to surprise them, he had left his wife and child at another hotel and had gone to see his mother, who didn't recognize him when he walked in. As a joke, he had an idea of taking a room. All right, so it's his own mom's hotel. She didn't know who he was. He looked different. He was worth $1 million. So he walks in. Oh, this Czechoslovakian. I love this fucking story. Listen to the story of the Czechoslovakian. I forgot about this part entirely. Yeah, he decided to take a room, right? He had shown off his money. During the night, his mother and sister had beaten him to death with a hammer in order to rob him and had thrown his body in the river. Oh, God. The next morning, the wife had come into the hotel and, without knowing it, gave away the traveler's identity. The mother hanged herself. The sisters threw herself down a well. I must have read that story 1,000 times. On the one hand, it wasn't very likely. On the other hand, it was perfectly natural. Anyway, I thought the traveler pretty much deserved what he got, and he should never play games. So with all the sleep, my memories, you know what that means. It's masturbation, all right? This is not a channel for children, all right? It's memories, all right? It's all you got in there, hopefully. Hopefully for him. That's all he has to deal with, memories. Reading my crime story, and well, I don't know. He is French. I don't know. Could go any way he wants to. Whatever. It's 2025, man. Be an ally. I'm asexual, so fuck you. It's Pride Month. I do not celebrate. I'm like, can we asexual just like not be a part of that? Can I just like not? Can this not be a hill I have to die on? Can this not be the cross I have to crawl up on? Because I don't want to deal with it. That's kind of the point. It's kind of by association as an A. I doubt anybody's still watching at this point. Oh God, I have no idea. I don't watch my own channel. No, I don't see them. I don't see how many people are here. So my sleep, my memories, reading my crime story, the one crime story, and the alternation of light and darkness. Time passed. Of course, I had read that eventually you wind up losing track of time in prison, but it hadn't meant much to me when I had read it. I hadn't understand how days could be both long and short at the same time. Long to live through, maybe, but so drawn out that they ended up flowing into one another. They lost their names, only the words yesterday and tomorrow still had meanings for me. One day when the guard told me that I'd been in for 5 months, I believed it, but I didn't understand it. For me, it was the same thing, because it was the unending day that was unfolding in my cell, and the same thing I was trying to do. The day, that day, after the guard had left, I looked at myself in the tin plate. My reflection seemed to remain serious, even though I was trying to smile at it. I moved the plate around in front of me. I smiled, and it still had the same sad, stern expression. It was near the end of the day, the time of day I don't like talking about. Pause. Poor bastard. And you got to remember, this won a Pulitzer Prize, people. It's Nobel. I'm sorry, Nobel Prize, huh? And it won the Pulitzer. You got both. Yeah, not kidding you. This got a Nobel Prize. Like, it's about prison rape. Jesus Christ. I mean, like, seriously. Yeah, I said the hard R word. This is not a channel for children. I never said it was. I wouldn't suggest children read this because, number one, they wouldn't understand the nuance. Why waste pearls on swine? Anyway, let me finish this chapter. I'm sorry. I'm way off track here. My reflection to remain serious, even though I was trying to smile. I was near the end of the day, the time of day I don't like talking about, that nameless hour when the sounds of the evening would rise up from every floor of the prison in a cortege of silence. I moved closer to the window. In the last lighted day, I gazed at my reflection one more time. It was still serious. And what was surprising about that, since at the moment I was too. But at the same time, for the first time in months, I distinctly heard the sound of my own voice. I recognized it as the same one that I had been ringing in my ears for many long days, and I realized all the time that I had been talking to myself. Then I remembered what the nurse at Maman's funeral home said. No, there was no way out, and no one can imagine what nights in prison are like. I can go on. Chapter 3 just as short as any of the other chapters. But I'm sure I've wasted enough of everyone's time. If anyone's still watching, wow, you're a fucking trooper. The Court of Aziz. Yep. Okay, chapter. So we're about, I'd say, 2/3 of the way through this very, 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 very short book. Hope someone's listened and enjoyed. I hope someone doesn't mind that my mouth gets a little dry and skips over my remaining front tooth piece. But I enjoy reading. Hope you all had a good time, and I appreciate you taking time out of your day to stare into the void. And I will once again say, as Nietzsche famously penned, beware those that stare into the void. The void also stares back into you. Have a good one, guys.